Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hello everyone and welcome to Bouncing Back. I am your host Joanna and today we will be joined by our very own host Marie Stella Quek, who hosts Reloscope and Self-Improvement Atlas, and she's here with us to chat about something I feel is so relevant in today's society, and that is toxic relationships. So more importantly, how we can grow in resilience and get through these times. So hi Marie, how are you today?
Hi, fine, thank you. Trams are being annoying, but that's it.
Melbourne City for you. I'm so excited to finally get to chat with you, and I feel like there's no better way to get to know someone than like unpack toxic relationships.
100%.
So I'm super keen. Before we get into that section, I just want to get to know you a bit more with our Have You Met Marie section. So first of all, do you have a favorite book at all?
I'd like to say yes, but I really read more photography books than regular books.
Yeah.
Because pictures nice.
Fair enough.
I like reading, but boy, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What like types of photography books? Like instructional
Black
ones?
and white, but I recently got the Wes Anderson one, the one that's
okay.
like, I think it's something like I can't remember what it's called, but it's literally Wes Anderson or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, it's basically it's like a compilation of Wes Anderson like photos from different photographers, and it's really nice. Even though it's in color, and I prefer black and white. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've only got one like photography book, but I've never actually properly sat down and like gone through it. Like I've never considered that like my way of reading. But like I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, I know it's weird. Like I most of the time when I get one, I sit down and I just flip through it and be like, oh, that's my favorite one. Oh, that's my favorite one. And then I take a photo and be like, all that kind of stuff, which I guess maybe I'm the only one who does that. But
no, I love that. I'm super into photography, but I feel like I love looking at like the National Geographic and like got my little subscription.
Yeah, those slap too.
Yeah, so good. Highly recommend a National Geographic subscription. What do we have next? Movies. Do you have a favorite movie or anything you've watched recently?
Coraline. I always say it's my favorite movie.
Yeah, nice. Why is that? I've never heard that one before.
It just, it's like it's marketed as like a child's movie with all these dark undertones, and it's just nice.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it is underrated. I feel like
it's so timeless.
It is.
Yeah, and people don't realize that. Maybe people do. I just haven't found them. So
yeah, that's fair. I feel like it's because it's marketed, like you said, as a kid's movie. People are like, oh, I've outgrown watching that because like I'm not a kid anymore.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you do watch it again, there's like some mature themes in there.
There are mature themes, but I'm wondering if it's also because I just still have my kid at heart thing.
Yeah.
Like how people grow out of emo music.
Yeah.
I have not.
That's
kind of thing.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that though. I've actually never heard someone say that one of their favorite movies is Coraline. So
I think I've said it like 3 times now.
Respect. Yeah. We'll say it again for this show. Do you listen to podcasts at all?
Yes, my favorite one is Behind the Bastards, which is a history podcast, something about history.
Yeah.
Basically outlining all the monstrous figures in the world's history and going deep dive into it. And it's really, really cool. And the host, who is also a journalist, I just love his presenting style because he makes it feel like a conversation. He brings in the producers and the co-producers as well. And they just kind of, well, because all of them have a part to play in the research and all the storytelling. So it really is a conversation between the entire team, not the entire team, but like, a few people on the team. And it's just really, really fun. There's a lot of banter.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like just a strictly history, sciencey podcast.
Yeah.
It feels very listenable.
Yeah.
You can just sit back and relax at the end of your day and listen to it and unwind.
I love that. As someone who really likes true crime podcasts, I find that when it's more personable and they're not just talking at you, but also like it's a bit funny and like quirky, I find it so interesting
Yeah.
to even just sit and like listen for like an hour, or like when
Yeah.
you're on public transport or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
And when they comment on these figures and shit on them,
Yeah.
it's really funny as well. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I love that. I need to add that one to my list. I've been so slack with podcasts.
Yeah, I'll send you a link.
That would be amazing, because I've been listening to one called Red Handed, but I haven't listened to it for like a year or two now, and I really want to get back into that. So thank you for sharing that. And lastly, I'd like to ask if you have a famous role model or anyone in your life you look up to.
Famous role model. First one, top of my head, Taylor Swift, obviously.
Oh, naturally.
Queen.
Yeah.
I've been a stan since debut album, which is like a country music era.
Yeah. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, songwriting is just incredible. Marketing genius. And she's kind of funny sometimes.
I think she is. I feel like she's such a great character as well. And people like diss her a lot.
Yeah.
But I think she's got like hundreds of songs, right? Like if you never want to run out of someone's songs to listen to, Taylor Swift.
And the thing is, the weirdest part is her best songs are never her singles. Her singles often are one of her worst songs, some of her worst songs.
Yeah.
Like in Lover. Anyway, I'm getting off track.
We'll get back onto track with some interview questions now. So I'll jump straight into it. Why do you personally think that resilience is important in our life?
That's a good question. Well, I think everyone has some kind of resilience, right, to have to walk this earth. That sounds as if like, everyone is going through like the worst time in their life, but no, it's not. Well, like it's just that everyone has bad times, and in order to keep going, you have to have some level of resilience, because if you just break down minor inconvenience, which I know a lot of us do joke about it, but if you think about it, we don't actually just lie down and not do anything after a minor inconvenience. We joke about doing it for like 5 minutes and then we go on with our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
And just, that's how everything keeps moving. And I'm not saying that like one person is controlling how the whole world works, but it's kind of like, it's a domino effect.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like as you go through life, like you learn that there are certain things that shouldn't occupy your mind as much as they do. And when you do come across that like 5 or 10 years later, you're like, I've been through that. Like I know how I can cope with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then you obviously come across things you've never dealt with before. So they impact you in a very different way. Yeah. But again, resilience is important to be able to get through that. But it's easier said than done.
It is so much easier said than done. But also, like, I feel like sometimes when you're going through shit, in the moment, you're like, I'm not handling this well at all. And then months later, you look back and you're like, oh, actually, I didn't do that bad. It was just in the moment, I just hated myself so much that I thought I was doing really, really bad.
Oh, 100%. Like, I hate that thing of like, you're in the moment and you're like, I have no idea how to get out of this. But then in like a few months, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, oh, like I got through it. But like, also, why was I being this way? It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So perspective is really important as well. And do you think that like, when it comes to being resilient, it means being like immune to stresses and adversity?
Not at all. I think being resilient is being affected by stresses and adversity, but still being strong through that.
Yeah.
Or even being weak but getting through it somehow.
Yeah.
I reckon it's just as strong as staying strong through it.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of courage to admit that you're being weak or that you are not doing well.
Yeah.
And some people don't have that courage. And so I think I personally recognize that all of it can be considered being resilient.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like even admitting that you're weak and knowing that you need to get out of that state is a form of resilience, because I feel like if you're sitting in a situation and you're not even admitting or trying to cope, then you're not being resilient. And I don't think I've ever met a single individual that isn't affected by anything. I feel like that's just impossible.
Yeah, I've met some people who they aren't as affected.
Yeah.
They're still somehow affected, but it's just the tiniest bit.
Yeah.
But even then, I'm like, how do you even do that?
Literally, I relate to that so hard. Like, I feel like there are some people who something bad will happen to them and they will just be like, yeah, but I know how to cope. Or like, yeah, I'm like going through it, but I'm good. And I'm
Yeah.
like, tell me your secrets. How are you doing this?
And also, I used to think, because again, I used to not be working on myself, and I was just thinking a lot about other people. I used to think that when people said, "Oh, I'm working on myself," I used to think that that was just bullshit.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand it. Now I
Yeah.
do, and now I'm like, oh, I see the importance of it, and I see what working on yourself means, and I
Yeah.
respect it. Back then, I was like, that's a myth.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like working on yourself is such a hard thing to grasp. Like, people are like, you need to work on yourself. And you're like, okay, so like I'll just do this one thing and that's me working on myself. Like, what is working on yourself mean to you?
To me, I think it means introspection, just a lot of introspection and reflecting on yourself, your character. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to be a better person. Sometimes it can just be as simple as like, oh, you need to be more assertive with some people to avoid getting stepped on. And, and instead of being like, oh, people step over me all the time, you gotta improve how, like, the way you stand up for yourself and just be a bit more assertive, because sometimes people don't even realize how they're treating you,
Yeah.
and you kind of have to just take that's life. You kind of just have to accept it and just kind of adapt to it,
Yeah.
and also just not falling into the whole of like, oh, everyone's treating me like shit, that kind
Yeah.
of thing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there is a certain amount of accountability, but also not blurring the lines between taking accountability and blaming yourself for what's happened.
Yeah, because it's okay to feel like shit for the way someone's treated you, but then it's up to you now to decide what happens next and how you deal with it.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that leads perfectly into unpacking what a toxic relationship is. I mean, we can give it a go. I feel like we'd be here for hours if we just tried to do that. But like, what does a toxic relationship mean to you? What would it look like?
I think a toxic relationship would mean either one of the parties in the relationship feels so strongly negatively affected by it that it's impacting their everyday life. They're thinking about it all the time. And well, I don't want to go into specifics because it's a very, very generic term. To me, I think it really just boils down to how one of, like, either party feels. If you feel like you've been poisoned by this relationship, that's a toxic relationship to you.
Yeah, like before we were also saying that like a toxic relationship is very subjective to the individual. You know, like society has this idea of a toxic relationship being one that is abusive, like physically abusive or like emotionally manipulative, for example. But like everyone has their versions of what toxic is. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Yeah, definitely. And do you think there are different types of relationships that can be toxic other than like romantic ones?
100%. I feel like I've been through some of my friendships which were toxic, and I've seen some of my friends go through such things as well. Yeah, just don't think that a relationship has to be romantic for it to be toxic.
Yeah, definitely. I also don't know if this is true, but I feel like it's so much easier to come out of a toxic friendship than it is to come out of a toxic romantic relationship.
Really? I
Yeah.
feel the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, I think because after my major toxic romantic relationship, I was a lot more cautious with romantic relationships. And so whenever I smelt toxicity coming up, I was like, that's it, I'm done. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And then with friendships, no one really tells you growing up that you might have to deal with these things. No one really
Yeah.
tells you, hey, you might have to break up with your friends when you're older and you grow apart and someone's not treating you right as a friend. You might
Yeah.
have to have these conversations as adults and you might have to break up if you disagree. I don't know about you, but I was never taught that. So I have stayed in friendships that weren't good for me for far too long.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it blows up. So maybe it's different for everyone.
Yeah. Like, I feel like I've grown up being taught that friends drift, but relationships end, you know? So, like, you can drift from a friend, and that way it doesn't feel as much of like a heartbreak when it does happen. And when you're like, oh, you know what? We're actually not as close anymore as I thought, but I'm okay with that because it's been happening over time. But with a relationship, when, for example, that comes to an end because it's been toxic, it like hits you really hard because it's all happening at once.
Yeah. I think I was taught the same thing. It's just that I have had friends who have manipulated me or verbally abused me. So that wasn't really drifting. That wasn't really drifting. That was definitely a like, let's end this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely
So
think that. Like,
that's a lot harder.
it's
Yeah.
so different for everyone. Like, again, like toxic relationships are so subjective. How people get through them and get out of them is so subjective as well. How would you say that being in a toxic relationship impacts your personal resilience?
I think it helps build my resilience a lot. I feel like when I was a teenager or when I was in my early 20s, I would have dealt with toxic relationships in a very different way. And it's because I wouldn't say it's that I didn't have resilience. I think it's just a different kind of resilience. Like I was in that very hard mindset of I've got to see this through. I've got to do everything that in my power to make sure I've done, like I have to have done everything I could to save this relationship or to hold it out. I have to try every single thing. I think that's still some form of resilience. But I'm not gonna lie, there's some weakness there of like I'm not ready to let go of this person, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that has helped build into a different kind of resilience of like now I am strong enough to say goodbye to this person if they are not doing anything good for me. Not anything good, but like if they are negatively impacting my life far too much and there's no talking out of this, I have to put myself first. And I think that's a different kind of resilience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, people always tell you like after your first breakup, like you get through it and you're much stronger as a person and you know more about what you want. So I definitely think that applies to it, and that's like a form of resilience as well. But I feel like the ability to let go as well, that is a huge form of resilience and something you can't really teach yourself to do unless you go through it.
Yeah, it's kind of like sometimes to run is the brave thing. And that's a Taylor Swift quote.
There we
But
go.
I vibe with that lyric so much.
Yeah.
Sometimes to run is the brave thing. Sometimes to I can't remember the rest, but yeah.
No, we get the gist. I feel like there's so many quotes that can be applied to this. Like sometimes the bravest thing to do is to leave or something like that. There's like always a quote.
Yeah, and it
everything.
always sounds cheesy, but it is true. Yeah.
Yeah, like what else is it? If you love something, let it go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, which honestly to me doesn't really make sense, but I kind of get the sentiment and where it's coming from. But yeah, we are so off track. I knew this was going to happen when we were talking about something like this. But how can someone go about recognizing that they're in a toxic relationship?
Oh boy, that's tough. I think it's also very subjective again, and there are so many examples of there's so many different examples, in so many different situations where something could be toxic. But I think the most important thing to think about, the most important thing to consider is if it is negatively affecting you, and it's on your mind every single day, all the time, and you've tried talking to this person about it, and that it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, that's when I think it's time to be like, maybe we should call it quits. But then again, it's like, that's not really a good example of when something's toxic, is it? That's like very generic, but it's very hard to think of like a specific like factor to which something can be a toxic relationship, and you can identify it as a toxic relationship.
Yeah, like I don't think like you can go through a relationship and be like toxic. You know, it's more something like when it comes to an end and when you have time to like reflect on it and think about it is when you come to the conclusion of, oh, these were really unhealthy things that were happening.
Yeah, and I think it also I think part of the toxic relationship thing includes patterns that you've tried to correct, but they just keep coming back.
Yeah.
That I think is one of the hallmarks of a toxic relationship.
And why do you think they like keep coming back? Like why, if you're trying to work on something, does it keep being a problem?
Either the person that is trying to correct the problem doesn't actually want to correct it, or they just don't care and think that they can go on doing it and maybe the next time you'll forget about it, or they frankly maybe they just forgot. Maybe like it's just willful ignorance or something. Like maybe they just, you had a happy moment, a little good patch there, and then they completely forgot about keeping their actions in check or something.
Yeah.
And then they revert back to their actions. Maybe that's that too.
Exactly. And I feel like that's when you really need to take a step back and probably separate yourself from that. And that's where quitting or like leaving the situation, I don't like the word quitting, but like being brave enough to say that you're done with being in that situation will give you the clarity to see that you are in a toxic relationship or were. Yeah, definitely. And why do you think people want to hold on to being in a toxic relationship?
I have actually talked to my therapist about this before. So I can tell you some of the answers, not all of them, because I feel like there are many answers to this. But one of the reasons I feel like it could be because it's just comfort. The toxic relationship, they could be repeating patterns that you were already comfortable with because they are similar to what you were brought up with during childhood, and it just feels like home. It feels like everything's wrong with this, but at the same time, nothing is wrong. And it's a very weird space to be in. And I've been there before. And it's kind of like, you know you shouldn't be treated this way, but at the same time, you were brought up with the expectation to be treated this way. And so it's like, yes, you are in grief, but at the same time, you're just so comfortable with it already. And I think that's why. And then the second answer to that in my head is just not wanting to let go yet, like just not being ready.
Yeah. And I also think it comes down to we accept the love we think we deserve as well. And I've been through that like situation where you're so comfortable with how things are despite them being bad, and despite knowing that in your head it's not supposed to be this way, but like leaving it would be more uncomfortable than staying.
Yeah. And some people are also just frankly afraid to be alone.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a diss, but it's not, because plenty of people are afraid to be alone. Being alone does suck sometimes. Like, it's not that fun all the time. Like, I could tell you right now, I do enjoy my alone time, but sometimes it's kind of dull. It's kind of freaking dull.
Fair enough.
It's kind of boring.
Yeah.
So I understand, but at the same time, girl or guy, leave.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's about weighing up what's more important. Like, you have to go into a relationship, whether that be like a friendship or a romantic relationship, being like so unapologetically yourself and not having to sort of settle in any way. But it's so hard to tell yourself that when you are in that relationship.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. I feel like a lot of people also stay in toxic relationships because they think that, oh, this is the only person that accepts me for who I am. Where am I going to find this ever again? Like, this is all I have. And that makes it infinitely harder to leave.
Yeah. And I feel like that mindset of this is all I have is just like unraveling this sort of inability to see that you have so much more than just this other person. Like, you have yourself and you have like what you bring as well. But I think that also requires another level of resilience and like personal growth to be able to see that that person doesn't just make you who you are, kind of thing. Yeah. And like, do you think that it's also important to recognize that you might have played a part in why the relationship became unhealthy, even if, the other person's already been like, yep, like, I'm the reason why this has become this way? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think it's important to acknowledge it. But it is also just it's very hard to toe the line, because sometimes it's like sometimes you're just in this space of like you're so fragile that the moment you're like, oh, yeah, I had a part to play in it, and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm the problem after all.
Yeah, that sucks. Like, having that moment is so terrible.
Yeah, but then you kind of have to come out of it and be like, no, I am not the problem. It's just that like I need to work on being more assertive, or I have to work on my communication skills, or I have to work on this, I have to work on that. So instead of going to that just completely negative space of like, oh, I'm the problem, I deserve no one. You kind of have to take yourself out of that, and also kind of think, how would you advise a friend if you were seeing them go through this? You suddenly wouldn't be like, yes, friends, you are the problem. You suck.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great perspective though, because a lot of people, that was actually funny. You would so not say that to your friend. But also, like, a lot of people say this to you, I'm sure you've heard it too. Like, if your friend was going through this or what you were going through, what would you tell them? And you would be like, oh, I'd tell them, you deserve better, like, you are not the problem, But then it's so hard to accept that advice, and actually be like, oh, I deserve something better than this, or like, I'm not the problem, but I know I have things I need to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's the other part. I just think people should also not focus on attacking someone's personality, instead be like, oh, like you've done this certain thing and it didn't make me feel good, because people tend to be like, you are the toxic one, or you are the problem. Like, stop it. Like, that's kind of like, how do you think the person's going to feel? They're not gonna, like, when someone hears that, they're not going to feel like they want to be receptive. Their first instinct is going to be like, I have to defend myself. I have to defend like what kind, like the person that I am.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if you're focused on actually communicating what went wrong, that might be helpful.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like, oh, yeah, I think I'm done.
No,
Yeah,
no, I
think I'm
totally get where
rambling.
you're going with that. And I think it like links back to what you were saying before about like, you're with this person and you're like, they're the only one that accepts me. They're the only one that's done this. And you think they're the only one that exists out there for you. And it's kind of like, oh, they came into your life at like the perfect time. And these are just two people in need of like the same piece of that puzzle. But it doesn't mean that they're meant to be.
Yeah, and it could just mean like, well, you were meant to be for that time, for that period of
Yeah.
time. I've thought about this a lot. Sometimes you feel like, oh, this person's the one. Maybe you were the one for this point in time in my life. You're
Yeah.
meant to be there to serve a purpose. Not saying that, they are merely that, but you meant to be there to, like, you're meant to be a part of my journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like someone said something to me once where they were like, this person was supposed to have you in their journey so they could realize that, they needed something different. And you need to find someone that's already been through that, that's been through the, this is not what I need, this is what I'm looking for kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a sad reality that sometimes the person you think is right isn't right as well. And that brings me to my next question of what do you say to someone who wants to, go back to a relationship that might have been unhealthy for them?
I say, have a sleep through it,
Yeah.
Before you do anything, and also evaluate how far both of you have come since then. Like, I feel like if you evaluate it and both of you have grown and take accountability for what's happened in the past and can talk through things now and things are different, sure, go ahead. But if everything's still the same,
There's no
then
point.
like, why are you getting back together? Things will still be the same, and you will have to fight off that instinct because it's very, very difficult. You will want to run back into their arms and scream like, take me back right now, and just want to feel at home again. And that's really hard to fight off, but you have to do it.
And that's where I feel like time, like you said, sleep on it. Obviously not just for like one night, but like actually take time to like think about it. And
yeah, I'm sorry, please do not
guys,
just sleep
disclaimer.
for one night and then in the morning, okay, it's been one night, I've slept over.
That is not what Marie is saying at
No.
all, guys. She means like an extended amount of time, sleep on it for multiple nights. But yeah, it's about, I think it might be that time where you're not focusing on that. Like, that's not your priority. And like, you've spent time working on yourself, and like one day it pops into your head and you're like, oh, there was this person, and we did talk about doing this stuff. Maybe I could reevaluate, kind of thing. But that shouldn't be on the forefront of your mind. You shouldn't be doing like your growth and your like bettering your resilience for them. It should be for yourself.
It should definitely be for yourself. I think it took me so many relationships to understand that.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of my early adult life, and I'm only in my mid-20s, so that's saying something.
Yeah. But I think it's just so important to be able to do that, because I feel like once you start to prioritize yourself everything will fall into place as it's meant to. And no matter what happens, you will be okay with that because you've still got all of this like growth and stuff that you've done.
Yeah.
So that's what resilience is. The end. No, I'm kidding. And
wouldn't it be easy if we could just end all of our podcasts on that? Yeah, that's it.
what it is, guys.
The end.
Bye.
See ya.
I honestly wish it was that easy, but then this is also just like our personal experience. My next question. What do you think is important when it comes to healing from a toxic relationship? Because that's part of growth as well.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
That's okay. What do you think is important when it comes to healing from a toxic relationship?
I think the most important thing, and I'm going to feel like a broken record here because I feel like I've said this too many times, but focusing on yourself is very, very important. And I think it sounds so generic because it's like, okay, what does focusing on yourself even look like, right? That's the question I asked so many times when I didn't understand it. I think focusing on yourself just looks like doing the things that you've always wanted to do, finding the hobbies that you want to do apart from this person in that toxic relationship, just finding your own things, finding your own people. And that's going to take a while because some people don't know what that looks like. And that must be really hard because it's like, where do I even start?
Yeah.
I don't know. Scroll on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
find a niche interest.
Literally, just pick one thing. And I feel like it's so important not to be like, oh, that's normally something we would have done together. I can't do it because I don't have that person to do it with. It's still like Emma Watson talks a lot about self-partnering, and like you can be self-partnered in a relationship, but you can also be self-partnered as an individual. And I think that's such a relevant concept when it comes to talking about resilience and moving through these situations.
Yeah, and you can always like just find a friend that you want to do things with as well.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to do all these things on your own. You don't have to be a lonesome individual if you're not in a relationship, you know?
Yeah.
And if you don't have friends, then I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I mean,
find some
yeah,
friends.
that's a whole different podcast. Like, that's a whole different episode, honestly. But let's assume that you have someone you can turn to.
Because I want to acknowledge people who actually don't have a lot of friends. I feel like, representation
is important. I mean, even if you don't have that many support systems in your life, you can still turn to like yourself. You can turn to what you do have, or you can always make new friends, and that's about putting yourself out there as well.
You can do journaling. That might help with the catharsis.
Yeah.
Which might not be for everyone, but I don't know, anything that helps with the catharsis, I feel like always gets you in a better mood.
100%. And let's like normalize taking your friend out on a date. Like you don't have to go out for dinner with your partner. Like you can ask your friend out. Like you can do everything that you can do with a partner minus a few things with a friend, you know? I mean, unless like you guys are comfortable with that.
Minus a few unknown, like undisclosed things.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's all up to like the relationship that you have. Yeah.
But if that's you guys' preference, then it's like, yeah, 100%. Go ahead, knock yourselves out.
Yeah. Fluidity is so important when we talk about all of this stuff as well. So yeah, I think we are doing so well. I'm having so much fun talking about this as well. Let's go into our little practices, experiment, debrief section. So we're just going to ask you how you personally deal with this. So what are some practices or a practice that you do to cultivate growth after a toxic relationship?
I think, again, like I've said this before, just keeping myself in check and reminding myself to welcome myself. I do write a lot of songs, so that's a personal thing for me. But listeners can always find their own version of writing songs, you
Yeah.
know? And that's something that I don't really like. I never write with anyone else, not because I don't want to. It's just like a very personal thing, right? So find your own personal thing. Find your own little like, this is my me time and I do it on my own and I actually enjoy my own company and I'm not longing for someone else. In fact, if someone else wants to come over right now, don't.
Yeah.
Because
that's
I
a good
want to
indicator.
work on this during this time. And I think that just really helps to get you comfortable with being alone.
Yeah. Again, like not one size fits all when it comes to this. And even if like you were to tell people what you personally do, it's not going to work for them. You know, it's about finding something that brings them comfort other than the person that was in that relationship with them.
Yeah, some people like to cook on their own. I like to cook on my own, but I also like to cook for other people. So that's not going to work for me like as a personal little endeavor. But it could be what works for other people.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could be even watching Netflix or being in bed and reading a book, like, or genuinely anything that you feel like is something that you want to do on your own is already a great indicator that it's something you can do to cultivate personal growth. Yeah, so that's really important. And do you think there are challenges to doing the practice that you do?
Yes and no. Actually, I don't think I can say yes and no.
I feel like it's probably a yes or it's no.
It's a yes no question. Okay, the answer is yes, there are challenges, but no, they aren't that serious. They aren't that hard to overcome. I think that was what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got that.
Yeah, I think the few challenges are definitely one of them, as you've talked about before, getting comfortable, because it's not going to happen overnight unless you I mean, maybe for some people it might happen overnight, but it might not happen for everyone overnight. I think it took me a couple of years to get there. I was always just itching to be with someone, like be with a friend. I'll always have to go out every single day and meet someone, even if it's a friend. I just have to be around people because we're social, like, or I'm a very social person.
Yeah.
So I had to do that. But I think getting comfortable with liking the things that you're doing on your own, and you can even share about your experiences with a friend afterwards. That's still socializing,
Yeah.
and that might help take away the isolating feeling of like, oh, I'm only doing this on my own. I'm the only one who knows about this.
Yeah. And on the lines of like sharing things with friends and stuff, like your partner or that person that you just had a toxic relationship could have been that person where you texted about everything and now you're like, oh, I've just done something. Oh, I don't have them to text about this, And it's not about replacing that person with like the friends in your life. It's more about putting more effort into what you do have as opposed to what you don't have. Like instead of trying to chase after something that's left your life, put that effort into what you do have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That could be like another way people can cope or a practice they can use. But back to like what you do, is there like a certain time you set up to do this?
Not really, because despite functioning a lot better with routine or schedule, I hate routine. Like, don't even, like, if I make myself do this one thing from, let's say, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on a sudden day, I will dread like doing it, and I will be very stressed keeping time, making sure I'm actually doing it 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on this sudden day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, well, I have this on my list of things that I need to do. I just need to get it off the list by the end of the week or something.
Yeah.
Or like if it's just on a certain day, that could be fine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's more of a me thing. I feel like maybe other people would benefit from that.
Yeah.
Personally, just not for me.
I mean, again, like everything we're talking about, it's so hard to be like, hey, so this happened, do this now.
Yeah.
It's so subjective. So all we can do is just share like
Yeah.
ways that we go about it. But I think if you're a person that loves routine, put it into your routine. If you're a person that just likes to know that you have to do things and you'll just do it, then that also works as well. But how do you think this has helped build your resilience over time?
I think, well, again, because like I personally feel like there are two types of resilience, right? It takes one type of resilience to go through something like that in the first place, and then the second type of resilience is the aftermath of it, of amending your perspective on things.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I don't think it's really made me more resilient. It's just made me find perspective.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
still as resilient as before. I'm just a bit more clever.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And like, no shame in being like, I'm smarter because of what's happened. It's a lot to do with like, I personally think how you've used that situation to become stronger, because there is the before you and then there is the after you.
Yeah.
And the after you is just all in your hands.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think I'm very adamant about that statement, because I did get people would say that I was weak before or something like that, maybe friends. And at that point in time, I did think that I was weak, but I just want to vouch for my younger self now and whoever is going through something like that. No, you're not weak. You just need you just need time. You just need the time. If you're not ready, you're not ready. That doesn't make you weak.
Exactly.
People go through these things all the time. Doesn't make you more weak than someone else.
100%. And I feel like as someone who's just starting their 20s and having gone through, like a relationship that hasn't worked out, there's so much you can do in the situation you're in. And like a lot of people will tell you, you're too naive, you're too young, you'll learn. But like you are also a person living in this current moment and you can do something to change that as well. You don't have to be that young, naive person who learns 10 years down the track. You can learn now if you just put that into your own hands. That, again, is resilience. Like, there's no age to be more resilient,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's maybe a nice way to leave today's episode. I honestly wish we could talk about this for genuine hours. Like, I feel like I could do that.
And we could definitely spill the tea in our own time.
Spill the tea, but that's for like another episode, maybe.
Really?
I don't know. Probably not.
Are we allowed to spill the tea?
I don't know if we're allowed to spill the tea.
It's probably like allowed but not preferred.
Yeah, maybe we can do a part 2 pending this blowing up and becoming really big. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Welcome.
I had so much fun chatting. And for those who want to find out more about you, where can they go?
So many places. I don't know. Pick a social media.
Instagram.
Okay, at Marie Stella with an extra A.
Beautiful. Well, everyone's so connected these days, so I'm sure we can find you anywhere. And on your podcast as well. So people can find you there.
On the
She knows what she hosts, I promise.
And on Self-Improvement Atlas and Reloscope.
There we go. Well, we also have Marie's details in the description below. And to everyone listening, please don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And we will see you guys next time. You've been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 life management perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel. as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna, thanks for tuning in.